The Scarlet and Violet era is officially over, but was it actually good? Now, with the new Mega Evolution set on the way, a new Pokemon era is starting, and Black Bolt and White Flare are our official final sets for the Scarlet and Violet era. Though that's why in this video, I want to look back and go over the Scarlet and Violet era and really ask the question, how good was the Scarlet and Violet era actually? Now, Generation 9's TCG era did a lot of amazing things. It introduced illustration rares, it introduced special illustration rares, and gave us some of the best Pokemon card artworks ever created. However, it also had a dark side, which I will unpack in this video. So that's why I want to go over each set of the era and kind of ranking them, along with going over the artwork, speaking about each set, and kind of putting them in a tier list as well. First time I've done this. Now, it'll probably be a little bit of a longer video than I usually make, but I do imagine it's going to be a bit of fun. So let's see how we go. Though the first on this list is Scarlet and Violet base set, which was released on March 31st, 2023. Now, Scarlet and Violet base was pretty interesting because it did introduce illustration rares and special illustration rares, and these were a really big deal for collecting. Just looking at what we have here, and I'm looking at all the illustration rares in front of me along with the SIRs, the Gardevoir EX was incredible, dude. Okay, such a cool artwork to enter the era. Same with the Great Tusk EX, and of course the Koraidon and Miraidon as well looked really cool. I do think the set was a really good base set, and when we look at base sets, probably the only base set that was better than Scarlet and Violet base was the original base set in 1999. I don't know if that's a massive call to say, but really, I mean, when I'm looking at the artworks and the fact that it did introduce illustration rares and SIRs, I mean, when we look at the Sword and Shield base set, that was such a kind of boring set. I mean, you had Gold Zamazenta and Gold Zacian as the chase cards. You did have the Snorlax Gigantamax card as well, but you didn't really have these awesome artworks that we got here as well. So just looking at these, I do think the Scarlet and Violet base was pretty cool. Also, what I really liked about this era was the product availability. It was such an easy set to get. And in 2024, you could have picked this up for like 89 USD. It was a cheap booster box, man. So, you know, great value for money. Pull rates were pretty fair. And I do think this was a really good intro to the Scarlet and Violet era. Honestly, I can't really complain with Scarlet and Violet base. So I reckon I'm going to put Scarlet and Violet base for the Scarlet and Violet era. I'm thinking it kind of did miss some really expensive kind of high hitting chase cards as well. Because Scarlet and Violet base didn't have a real big top chase card, and it didn't really have any singles that you really kind of stand out for the whole era, but it was a good base set. I do think it deserves B tier. Even though I did like it, I still think it was a base set, and you know, it doesn't really deserve A tier or S tier for now. Now, the second expansion was Paldea Evolved, which was released on June 6th, 2023. And for a second set, they're usually really lackluster, and honestly, Paldea Evolved was the exception. I mean, I remember when Paldea Evolved released, it was kind of getting really exciting. Now, why Paldea Evolved was so incredible was because of the illustration rare roster within this set. This was bloated with illustration rares, but I'm not even saying bloated as a bad word. I'm actually using it in a real good way here. It just had so many awesome artworks, dude. Like when you look at Paldea Evolved and the kind of quality of the illustration rares, they really stand out. I mean, if you just look at some of them, like right here, I'm looking at the Heracross illustration rare. What an awesome artwork. Same thing with the Fletchinder as well. Really, really cool artworks from Paldea Evolved. And of course, it did have the Magikarp illustration rare, which, you know, is one of the top chase cards of the Scarlet and Violet era. Really awesome Shinji Kanda artwork. Same artist who created the Lost Origin Giratina. Probably where Paldea Evolved didn't really perform that well though, was the special illustration rares, which is really interesting because Paldea Evolved was kind of, you know, really heavy in the illustration rares, and the artworks from the illustration rares are amazing. But in terms of the SIRs, I don't think the caliber of the artworks really kind of did it. And again, we didn't really get a real top chase card in terms of special illustration rares. We did get the Magikarp, but then again, the SIRs do feel a little bit lackluster. I mean, you've got the Quackquival special illustration rare, kind of okay, nothing really that you go, wow, I really need this card in my collection. The Chi-Yu is a good artwork, but I do think we've had much better artworks later in the era. So, I mean, Paldea Evolved was great, but I don't think the special illustration rares did it any favors. But in saying that, it does have probably the coolest illustration rares out of the Scarlet and Violet era, and it does have the Magikarp illustration rare. So for this reason, Paldea Evolved for me is A tier. Now, while we're speaking about these Pokemon cards, if you like to buy and sell Pokemon cards, that does bring me to today's video sponsor, which is Misprint. Now, Misprint is a US-based platform where collectors can buy and sell Pokemon cards along with sealed product at community-driven prices. One of the coolest features of Misprint is their buy now and sell now system. So as a buyer, you can set the price that you're willing to pay for a particular set, and if a seller is happy with it, the sale can happen instantly. And as a seller, if you need funds, you can get an immediate sale, which is amazing for liquidity, which is something that's not really talked about a lot within the hobby. Now, if you're going to card shows or you're just sorting through your collection, the Misprint app is a game changer. The Misprint app allows you to scan multiple PSA slabs in one photo, and it will automatically show you up-to-date market prices. The more people that actually use Misprint, the better it becomes for everyone. Now, if you do want to check it out, feel free to use my referral code below and you'll get $5 off your first purchase. A big shout out to Misprint for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to the tier list. Now the third set was Obsidian Flames, which came out August 11th, 2023. Now this set was interesting as it was literally Darkness Ablaze 2.0. If you don't know about Darkness Ablaze was quite a lackluster set in the Sword and Shield era, and of course it was a Charizard themed set, and you had the Charizard VMAX chase card in the Sword and Shield set Darkness Ablaze, which was, you know, the top chase card back then. Everyone wanted it, but of course now no one even looks back at that card. It's kind of like a boring card, right? Now, Obsidian Flames, to me, I personally feel is a very, very lackluster set. You have one card in the whole set that is really deserving of kind of a chase card, which is the Charizard, which I don't think is that good. It is so stacked with Charizards, you kind of just get a little bit sick of it. The reason why I don't really like Obsidian Flames that much is because when you look into the psychology of the collector, you got to think with Sword and Shield, we just had Crown Zenith. We just had such amazing artworks from Evolving Skies, Fusion Strike. Everyone was so excited for the Scarlet and Violet era. Scarlet and Violet base felt like, wow, what was gonna come? We know base sets are a little bit lackluster. What is gonna come from here? Then of course you got Paldea Evolved, which kind of felt like, wow, this is a really amazing set. And then Obsidian Flames kind of really flopped. So for that reason, I was never the biggest fan of the set. But it's not all bad, right? Some of the illustration rares are pretty cool. The Gloom illustration rare is an amazing artwork. The Ninetales illustration rare is awesome, and of course the Scissor is really cool as well. There is special illustration rares within Obsidian Flames that are under $10, so you know that is pretty telling. Even though they're easy to pull, you know, they aren't getting the high prices. So for this reason, Obsidian Flames for me is D tier. I gave my reasonings behind it. The fact that the ETB promo within Obsidian Flames is one of the best cards of the set is pretty telling, okay? So, you know, I just remember that era and how excited I was for Obsidian Flames, and when I saw the reveals, I was just left very disappointed. Now, the first specialty set for the Scarlet and Violet era was Pokemon 151. Now, personally, I think Pokemon 151 was one of the best Pokemon sets of all time, and not just for the Scarlet and Violet era, because how much it delivered with nostalgic throwbacks mixed with a modern spin. Pokemon 151 did a lot of things right. One thing you gotta remember when Pokemon 151 released was that, you know, you had that whole vintage kind of base set hype come throughout 2020 and 2021. Now, a lot of people were kind of leaving the hobby at this point, but what did Pokemon do? They released Pokemon 151, and all those people that were just kind of forgetting about collecting, they got all drawn back in, because why? Pokemon 151 was literally base set but updated for modern Pokemon. So they really did a good strategy with releasing it, and it did release at a really opportune time, and it did bring a lot of people back in the hobby. Pokemon 151, when it released, was very easy to get, so that's a massive tick, okay? You didn't have these crazy scalping issues with it. It was such an easy set. The only kind of product that you would struggle to get was booster bundles, but if you wanted an ETB, if you wanted a Pokemon Center ETB, if you wanted the Pokemon 151 UPC, that was all easy to get, dude. They were all available. And then when you look at the illustration rares and how all the starters had that kind of trio of a storyline, dude, it was incredible. It is such an amazing kind of set. The illustration rares are awesome. Pokemon 151 is one of those sets that if you get a master set of it, you're just so excited to pull any card. And because it's all in the same order as the Pokedex, it is really cool. It's such a fun set to master. And you know, Pokemon 151 really delivered. And of course, as you can see right now, the prices of Pokemon 151 are out of this world as well, because so many people love the set. So I think Pokemon 151 is an obvious S tier. That is one of the greatest Pokemon sets released, in modern history, above Evolving Skies. It is such an incredible set, and it definitely deserves that spot. Now, 2023 was closing out, though the final set from 2023 was Paradox Rift, which came out on November 3rd of 2023. Now here, Paradox Rift, I always have a little bit of sympathy for it, because how do you follow up from Pokemon 151 and you now need to go in a mainline expansion, and you just had one of the coolest specialty sets release, and now you need to follow this up. Now, in terms of the follow-up from Obsidian Flames, Paradox Rift is a great follow-up from that. But in terms of a follow-up from 151, it did feel like we took a little bit of a step backwards. But of course, in terms of the overall theme of Paradox Rift, I think it really stuck to a good artistic theme. And really, we did get a lot of the Paradox Pokemon get kind of their time in the sun within this set, which was the main focus of it. In terms of the special illustration rares, my favorite from Paradox Rift is the Iron Valiant EX. And I think the most underrated special illustration rare from Paradox Rift is the Golisopod EX. I do think that they could have done a little bit more with the SIRs. They were good. They do have a nice colorful kind of vibrance about them, like the Tapu Koko. But then again, I don't think it did enough as a set, and I don't think it is that memorable as well. If someone brings up Paradox Rift, I wouldn't even know what first card comes to people's minds when they think of the set. Probably the Groudon illustration rare is the best card of the set, and of course it was a pretty desired card as well. But then again, it just always felt like there was a little bit of a misstep. That was such an awesome artwork, and I really think that should have been an SIR. But of course, because of that, there was some missteps along the way, and the illustration rares to me of Paradox Rift are much better than the special illustration rares. Yveltal and Brute Bonnet are really cool artworks as well, so a lot of them have cool artworks, but then again, I don't think it did enough. So for this reason, Paradox Rift is in C tier. And you know what? Oh, dude, I'm having so much fun with this tier list, just so you know. This is so fun. I've never done this. Maybe I'm gonna start doing it more, Maybe, let me know, do you wanna see more tier lists? It is fun. But right now, we do have an S, A, B, C, and D, and I didn't even expect that. That just came naturally. So this is just me going through the motions, talking out loud, feeling, it's all coming up, the emotions. Now, to start 2024, we had Paldean Fates, which was actually the set that came out when I first created this channel as well. I was just collecting like crazy at that point. I was just researching every set, and I'm like, you know what? I want to start talking about Pokemon investing, because I was really into the Scarlet and Violet era at that point. Really was enjoying it. But Paldean Fates was a really cool set to start 2024. I want to kind of break this down. I want to talk about the good of Paldean Fates. I want to talk about the not so good, and I want to talk about where I think they could have done better. Firstly, the hyper rares of Paldean Fates. Yes, they were creative. Yes, they were different, but not that memorable as a lot of people hoped for. They were very hard to pull. They were a nice breakaway from the gold cards, but I don't think that they were that memorable. Now, the illustration rares of Paldean Fates, you get 3 of them. You get Wugtrio, you get Palafin, and you get Pawmi. Not saying that these are bad, but they just don't feel enough. So the illustration rares of Paldean Fates were really lackluster. But where Paldean Fates did a great job is the shiny Pokemon in the set make it a very interesting set to open, because even if you don't pull a special illustration rare, you still are very likely to get one of the baby shiny Pokemon or any of the shiny Pokemon in the set. And because of that, I do think it makes it an interesting opening experience. Though where Paldean Fates really knocked it out of the park was the special illustration rares. In terms of the 3 SIRs that you get for the actual Pokemon within the set, which is the Gardevoir, the Bubble Mew, and of course the Charizard, these 3 artworks are just like 10 out of 10. They really nailed the artworks, and that really pulled Paldean Fates up to a new level. Now, in terms of where this goes on the tier list, because this set does have Bubble Mew, and personally I think Bubble Mew is one of the best cards of the Scarlet and Violet era for one reason, because it feels so unique to the era. So for this reason, because of the Bubble Mew, I'm putting Paldean Fates in A tier, and it's a well-deserved spot because it does have one of the most iconic chase cards from the Scarlet and Violet era within that set. Now also, if you are excited for the new Pokemon Legends ZA game and Pokemon gaming in general, I do have a second YouTube channel where I explore the Pokemon video games. In a recent video, I actually go over one of the worst Nintendo DS games to ever be released, which was Pokemon Dash. You can learn more about the channel in the video's description. Now, moving on to the next mainline expansion, it was Temporal Forces, which I personally feel is the most true Generation 9 set available. Now, Temporal Forces was really unique for one reason, and that was because of Iron Crown. If you were around during that time, that actually became the most expensive card from the Scarlet and Violet era as soon as it released, which was pretty crazy because there was a point in time time where the Iron Crown was more expensive than the Magikarp illustration rare. So, there's a little bit of trivia for you. But in terms of the set, I do think the special illustration rares are really, really awesome in Temporal Forces. The way that they all work and when they're together is amazing. And I really like that Temporal Forces doesn't have those massive kind of chase cards in the set. And it does feel like a very Generation 9 set. It is literally a picture perfect Gen 9 set. Really drew from the games, did a real good job there. It also had a real good illustration rare library. Some things that held Temporal Forces a little bit back was the pull rates were incredibly hard. It was a very hard set to kind of, pull anything from. And of course, it didn't have a chase card in it to kind of define the era in any way. But I think the easiest way to explain Temporal Forces was it didn't have any huge lows and it didn't have any huge highs either. So for Temporal Forces, I think it's well deserving of B tier. As I said, no massive highs, but no massive lows either. Now after this, the Scarlet and Violet era was kind of still struggling to find a true chase card, though that's where Twilight Masquerade came in and obviously delivered one of the most iconic cards within the era, which is the Greninja Special Illustration Rare. Now you may be thinking, wait, didn't you just say Bubble Mew was one of the top chase cards from the era? Correct, but you gotta remember that Bubble Mew took like a year to get there. When it released, it was selling for like 80 USD. In fact, it wasn't really a chase card until much later in the year. Whereas the Greninja Special Illustration Rare immediately became one of the most popular cards. And Greninja was the first card where it said, whoa, Scarlet and Violet era cards can really get this expensive. We thought that was only for Sword and Shield. Now, in terms of Twilight Masquerade, a few letdowns are the special illustration rares. The Ogapons are not that exciting, and usually for some reason, the Ogapons don't get the most fan demand when it comes to the cards within the Scarlet and Violet era. You did have the Blood Moon Ursaluna, which is okay. I really like the Carmine special illustration rare. I thought that was a really cool card in the set, and of course the Greninja as well. But other than that, in terms of the illustration rares, some are okay, some are pretty lackluster. I think the Infernape is a really cool card, but some of the other illustration rares I don't think did that well. For example, the Torkoal I think is a little bit lackluster, and same with the Pinsir. In terms of the best illustration rare from Twilight Masquerade, it would be a tie between Eevee and Tatsuguri, but then again, I still don't think that the set delivered that well. Even though it had amazing highs with the Greninja special illustration rares, the lows were pretty bad. So like I said with Temporal Forces before, it didn't have major highs, but it didn't have these huge lows. Well, Twilight Masquerade did have a pretty big high, but it also had a fair bit of lows as well. So for that reason, Twilight Masquerade goes in the B tier. Now after Twilight Masquerade came Shrouded Fable, which came out August 2nd of 2024. And it was clowned as one of the worst Scarlet and Violet era sets of all time. And I think a big reason for this was the special illustration rares. Dude, Shrouded Fable had so many problems when it came out. Firstly, it was delayed in the US, and secondly, a lot of people were just so disappointed with the set. It is kind of funny that, afterwards when the whole Pokemon hype happened, everyone was like, wow, Shrouded Fable, no, I want to buy that. And then Shrouded Fable started rising in price, which was kind of bizarre because that was such a cheap set, dude. So, I'm just looking at the artworks, I'm looking at Ogie Dogie there. Even though it is very relevant to how he presents himself in the video games and the DLCs, I still think the artwork is a little bit lackluster, and same with the Monkey Dory. I think the special illustration rares really drag Shrouded Fable down. And then you have the Loyal 3 where the illustration rares are so cool, like the Monkey Dory, the Pheasantipity, and the Okie Dogie all have amazing illustration rares. So here's the thing with Shrouded Fable and why it didn't kind of go as good as Paldea Evolved is because it didn't have a chase card to kind of pull it out or pull it into some iconic status. It kind of just stayed there and the illustration rares got buried, and it kind of felt like a Halloween set in a way. It just didn't have enough to pull it out. So for this reason, Shrouded Fable is in the D tier. It didn't have enough highs to kind of pull it, and of course the lows were too much. And then again, even though it did have some cool illustration rares, they weren't enough to really stand out. Now, only 1 month after Shrouded Fable came Stellar Crown. Now, Stellar Crown had very easy pull rates, and it was quite a small set. Though honestly, no one knew just how much the Scarlet and Violet era would change from here on out. So Stellar Crown was the final set where we had normal Pokemon cards, if you want to call it that, right? Because as soon as Stellar Crown released, that was kind of the end of what Pokemon cards would be for the Scarlet and Violet era in terms of being able to pre-order it and just being able to walk into a store and find the new cards on shelves. This was the final set of the era that was possible to do all this. In terms of the special illustration rares in the set, I think the Terrapagos is really cool. And of course, it did introduce the terrestrialized kind of rainbow borders on the cards. It had some kind of missteps as well, and it was a very heavily Terrapagos themed themed set. The illustration rares definitely were pretty cool with the Squirtle and the Bulbasaur as well, but it was also a very small set. Stellar Crown also had a food themed focus as well, which wasn't a bad thing. It was kind of different, but it didn't really do anything to kind of pull the Scarlet and Violet era above of what it was. Even though I really love the Terrapagos special illustration rare, I don't think the set is memorable enough, and for this reason it goes into the C tier. Now the next mainline set that released was Surging Sparks, which came out of November 8th of 2024. Though Pokemon TCG Pocket also released at the same time, and this is where the Scarlet and Violet era took a turn for the worse. The Scarlet and Violet era now had a lot of things going on, okay, because you just had the new mobile game Pokemon TCG Pocket release, and you also had Surging Sparks come out all at the same time, and of course Prismatic Evolutions, which was going to be the next set to release after this, was also announced. You know what happened here? Pokemon cards kind of became what they're like right now. From this point onwards was the end of being able to walk into a store and get Pokemon products. Now to me, Surging Sparks was a huge level up in terms of the mainline sets for the Scarlet and Violet era, and it was the first set that I really kind of took a step back and said, wow, we are in a huge new era for Pokemon cards. It really did a big level up. The Latias EX special illustration rare is really cool. I do like the Surging Sparks Pikachu as well, and same with the Hydreigon. The special illustration rares are very, very cool within the set. And of course, you also had the Latios and the Mesprit as well. I do think all these cards together made Surging Sparks a very exciting set to collect, especially because it was Pikachu focused as well. So a lot of people just really like the set, and you did have a Pikachu chase card. So for this reason, I think Surging Sparks had some real amazing highs, and for that reason, it does go into the A tier. Now, the next set, which was going to be the set to start 2025, was Prismatic Evolutions, which released January 17th, 2025, and this set was the official turning point for the Scarlet and Violet era, and this is where product availability literally became one of the most persistent issues in this era. As soon as Prismatic Evolutions came out, forget about it. The Surging Sparks hype was already big enough, but Prismatic Evolutions took it to another level, where usually an ETB would cost $60 retail price, and you would be paying $150 US to buy a Prismatic Evolutions ETB, not a Pokemon Center version. That was the kind of crazy prices. Now, Prismatic Evolutions has some of the greatest artworks from the Scarlet and Violet era. There's a reason why this set was obviously so much in demand. Now, if you have been in Pokemon for a while, the reason why this set was so in demand was because it really drew a lot from Evolving Skies. I really liked the set when I kind of revealed it, though one area where this set really did a drawback was because of the scalping issues, okay? And it's so hard to kind of look at Prismatic Evolutions in good light because of how difficult it made the Pokemon hobby become. Yes, there was amazing things. Yes, the artworks are incredible. When you look at all the special illustration rares from Prismatic Evolutions, you would just think they're out of this world. Though one of the areas where I didn't like Prismatic Evolutions was because they didn't include illustration rares in the set. It had very, very hard pull rates, and when you open the set, it's likely you're gonna pull nothing, which makes it a little bit disappointing as well. So literally every time you open Prismatic Evolutions, unless you pull a special illustration rare, you are really kind of just losing money when you open the set. And I know a lot of people say, hey, Phil, it's not about that. Hey, it's all about just collecting. But really, when you know the prices of Prismatic Evolution, what they are, you know, I know a lot of people don't want to just be opening their Prismatic Evolutions packs and losing a lot of money as well. So for this reason, even though the artworks are incredible, the lack of the illustration rares and the scalping issues push this to an A tier. And I do think if there was illustration rares and maybe if the scalping wasn't so bad, this would definitely be closer to the S tier set. But because of all the issues that happened, it unfortunately couldn't get to that position. Now at this point, Pokemon cards were incredibly hyped. Though to soften some of the hype, the next set which came out in March 28 was Journey Together. And this set was interesting for a few reasons. Number one, when Journey Together was released, it sold out within something like 5 minutes on the Pokemon Center store, okay? And it was a really bizarre thing to be selling out like that because everyone was like, oh, trainer Pokemon card are back, you know, trainer Pokemon cards, oh, I can't wait to collect them again. But then I was like, dude, no one cared about trainer Pokemon cards for like years. Why is everyone just getting excited for that again? And then of course, everyone was hyping Journey Together up. And once it released, then we all saw it all retrace and the prices just crashed so heavily. Now, Journey Together does have some really cool artworks like the Salamence. Also, the Iono's Belly Button is really cool and the Iono's Kilowatt Troll as well. It does have great cards within the set. I think it wasn't as bad as people made it out to be. I just think the problem was that the expectations for the Pokemon TCG became way too big at this point and it couldn't kind of live up to that. But also, it's nowhere near as good as the hype would have led you to believe. So for this reason, Journey Together goes in the B tier. I do think it is an okay set, but again, nothing to really pull it into A tier, nothing really that bad to also drop it below B tier either. Now, in May 30th of 2025, Destined Rivals released, and of course, it was the first Team Rocket set in over 20 years. The reason why I think Scarlet and Violet era is such an interesting kind of era is because it's had so many throwbacks within the one era. You've had Pokemon 151, you've had Destined Rivals, which is a Team Rocket throwback, and of course, the next set after Destined Rivals is a throwback to Generation 5, so it had a huge amount of throwbacks within the era. But Destined Rivals is a pretty cool set, dude. The reason why it's so great is because even though it was a Team Rocket throwback, it really felt like it had its own identity. The Team Rocket's Mewtwo to me is one of the coolest special illustration rares within the Scarlet and Violet era. You also have Cynthia's Garchomp as well. Same with Ethan's Ho-Oh and as well as Team Rocket's Moltres. The special illustration rares within the set are amazing. And also I think the illustration rares in Destined Rivals are really good. Destined Rivals to me is an amazing set and really it doesn't have any drawbacks and I think the highs of Destined Rivals are some of the best in the Scarlet and Violet era. For this reason, I think they did a Team Rocket set very well and for me, Destined Rivals is definitely S tier and that puts both Pokemon 151, which was a specialty set, and Destined Rivals as the mainline set in S tier. Now, to close out the era, on July 18th of 2025, Black Bolt and White Flare released, which were the first time in history that the English Pokemon sets had split sets with different cards inside each set. So we kind of were delivered two sets in one with Black Bolt and White Flare, which was really interesting. Now, obviously, because these two are together, I'm kind of confused. Should I put these together as kind of like a mixed bag and, you know, put them in the tier list, or should I split them? And I think it's only reasonable to split them because they do have different cards within the set. So I will start with White Flare. So the special illustration rares within White Flare are really awesome, really cool kind of set of cards. The Reshiram and the Hydreigon are the standouts in terms of the artworks. Like I said, it does remind me a lot of Crown Zenith, this set, because it just was such a big throwback. In terms of the illustration rare library of White Flare, I mean, when you look at all the cards inside this set, it is very hard for, you know, kind of to be disappointed with these. You know, the fact that every single Pokemon from Gen 5 gets an illustration rare between these two sets, though in saying that, as amazing as White Flare is, it also doesn't have anything to really draw it into S tier either. So for this reason, White Flare is A tier. Though again, when we look at Black Bolt as well, when you look at the Kyurem or even the Zekrom, and one that I kind of feel like a lot of people don't talk about is the Excadrill. I really think they did a good job with that artwork. But of course, if you get a master set of Black Bolt, it looks incredible, right? I mean, if you had a binder with all the water and the ice Pokemon from Black Bolt, the artworks are really on another level. The chase cards are these monochromatic white and black cards, which are cool, but they don't have enough personality for my liking to really pull them into an S tier. And for this reason, I'm also going to put Black Bolt in A tier. Maybe together they would kind of make it into S tier, but at this stage, when you separate them, that is the final reasoning. But as you can see, my tier list has been completed. And in terms of how good the Scarlet and Violet era was, actually, the Scarlet and Violet era was the greatest Pokemon TCG era we've had thus far. And it has been the most exciting era as well. In saying that, the best set from the Scarlet and Violet era is definitely Pokemon 151. And to me, the most disappointing set from the Scarlet and Violet era is definitely Obsidian Flames, which is kind of funny that they were right next to each other when they released as well. Though in saying that, the Scarlet and Violet era really has shown how many people are entering the Pokemon investing world. And in fact, Pokemon investing has grown so much within this era alone. And while a lot of people love investing in collectibles, it also has brought up a lot of questions on the rules of Pokemon investing. And one of the questions that comes up is, how does Pokemon investing actually work? Well, I break that down in this video right here where I explain the 7 timeless rules of Pokemon investing. Feel free to click on that video currently appearing on screen and you can learn more about it there. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and I'll see you on the next video.